r/AITA landlord drained my college fund while parents ignored me until video exposed her. I stared at my laptop screen, refreshing my bank account page for the fourth time in 10 minutes. The numbers hadn't magically changed. Where there should have been $8,247 in my college savings account, there was $831. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the transaction history. Withdrawal. 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 All authorized with my debit card, all from ATMs I'd never been to, all while I was supposedly asleep in my dorm room 3 hours away. This has to be a mistake, I whispered to my empty dorm room. But even as I said it, the sick feeling in my stomach told me it wasn't. I grabbed my phone and called the bank's fraud line. After 20 minutes on hold and another 10 explaining my situation to a representative who sounded like she was reading from a script, I got the news I was dreading. The transactions were all made with your physical debit card and correct PIN, so they don't qualify as fraudulent activity. You'll need to file a police report if you believe the card was stolen. Stolen. The word hit me like a punch to the gut because suddenly, horribly, I knew exactly where my debit card was supposed to be. 3 months ago, when I'd left for college, Mrs. Henderson had offered to help manage my local banking needs. She'd been our family friend for over a decade, had watched me grow up, had even thrown me a graduation party in her backyard. When she suggested I leave my debit card with her, just in case of emergencies, and offered to help transfer money between my checking and savings accounts, it seemed practical. Sweet, even. You're going to be so busy with school, she'd said, her warm smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. Let me handle the boring money stuff. I'll just move funds around as needed and keep everything organized for you. My parents had thought it was a wonderful idea. Helen is so thoughtful, my mom had gushed. You're lucky to have someone looking out for you like that. I trusted her completely. More than that, I'd been grateful. Now I was staring at evidence of what that trust had cost me. Nearly $7,000, gone. Money I'd saved from years of birthday gifts, summer jobs, and babysitting. Money my grandparents had contributed. Money that was supposed to get me through sophomore year. With trembling fingers, I called my parents' house. Dad picked up on the third ring. Hey, kiddo. How's school? Dad, something's wrong with my bank account. Someone's been taking money out of my savings, and I think. Slow down. What are you talking about? I took a deep breath and explained everything. The missing money, the ATM withdrawals, the debit card I'd left with Mrs. Henderson. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Dad? Are you there? I'm here. His voice was careful, measured. Honey, are you sure you didn't make these withdrawals and just forget? You've been under a lot of stress with the transition to college. My heart sank. Dad, I've never even been to half these locations. Look at the timestamps, some of these happened at 2 a.m. on weekdays when I was in my dorm studying. Maybe there's been some confusion with the way Helen's been helping you manage things. Why don't you call her first before we jump to conclusions? I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Reasonable explanation. As if there was any reasonable explanation for $7,000 vanishing from my account. Dad, what kind of reasonable explanation could there be for? Look, I trust Helen implicitly. She's been nothing but good to our family. There has to be a mix-up somewhere. His tone had shifted from concern to defensive, and I could practically hear him shutting down. Just talk to her, okay? Don't go making accusations you can't take back. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. I sat there for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. My own father had essentially told me to handle it myself rather than even consider that his precious family friend might have stolen from me. My hands were still shaking as I scrolled through my contacts to find Mrs. Henderson's number. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. Maybe she'd moved the money somewhere else for safekeeping, or there'd been some kind of banking error she was already working to fix. She answered on the second ring, her voice as warm and familiar as always. Oh, honey. How are you doing? How's college treating you? Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you about something. I was checking my bank account today, and there's money missing. A lot of money. The transactions show my debit card being used, but I never made these withdrawals. The pause was brief, but it was there. When she spoke again, her voice carried just the slightest edge. Oh, sweetie, you must be confused. I haven't touched your account except to move some funds around like we discussed. Are you sure you're looking at the right statements? I'm looking at ATM withdrawals. Cash withdrawals. Not transfers between accounts. Honey, you're probably just misreading the statements. You know how confusing bank websites can be. I'm sure if you look more carefully. Mrs. Henderson, I'm missing over $7,000. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, the warmth was completely gone from her voice, replaced by something cold and sharp that I'd never heard from her before. Are you accusing me of stealing from you? The way she said it made me feel like I was the one doing something wrong. Like I was being ungrateful and suspicious and horrible for even asking. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just trying to figure out what happened to my money. I think you need to be very careful about what you're implying here, she said, her voice taking on a threatening tone I'd never heard before. I've done nothing but try to help you, and this is how you repay me. By calling me up and essentially calling me a thief. That's not what You know, I've been having second thoughts about our rental arrangement anyway. Maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live when you come home for breaks. I don't need this kind of drama from someone I've tried so hard to help. My blood ran cold. Mrs. Henderson owned the small apartment above her garage where I've been living during summer breaks and holidays. It was affordable, close to my part-time job, and had been perfect for maintaining some independence while still being near family. The thought of losing it, especially now when I was already facing financial crisis, was terrifying. Please, I didn't mean to upset you. I'm just scared and confused about where my money went. Well, maybe you should be more responsible with your finances instead of blaming other people for your problems. I suggest you figure out what really happened before you go around making accusations that could ruin relationships. She hung up, leaving me sitting in stunned silence. The woman who had been like a second mother to me had just threatened to evict me for asking about my own money. And I still didn't have any answers about where $7,000 had gone. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing the cold edge in Mrs. Henderson's voice, so different from the woman who used to make me hot chocolate when I'd visit after school. I'd replayed our conversation dozens of times, analyzing every word, every pause, every shift in tone. By morning, I'd convinced myself to try a different approach. Maybe I'd been too direct, too confrontational. Maybe if I gave her the benefit of the doubt and asked for help instead of answers, we could figure this out together. I called her around noon, when I knew she'd be having her daily cup of tea in her sunroom. Mrs. Henderson. It's me again. I'm sorry about yesterday. I think I came across wrong. Oh, honey. Her voice was back to its usual warmth, like a switch had been flipped. I was hoping you'd call. I felt so bad about how our conversation ended. Relief flooded through me. This was the Mrs. Henderson I knew. I'm just really scared about the money situation. Could you maybe help me figure out what happened? Maybe there's something I'm not understanding about the bank statements. Of course, sweetie. You know I'd do anything to help you. There was a pause, and I could hear papers rustling. Actually, now that I think about it, I do remember making a few cash withdrawals for you. Emergency expenses that came up. My heart skipped. Emergency expenses. Oh yes, there were several things. Your car registration renewal, some maintenance issues with the apartment that needed immediate attention, a few other things. I paid for them out of pocket and then reimbursed myself from your account. I have all the receipts somewhere. I felt a spark of hope. Maybe Dad had been right. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Could you send me copies of the receipts? I need them for my records. Absolutely. I'll dig them up and get them to you. It might take a few days, you know how disorganized my filing system is. She laughed, and it sounded exactly like the Mrs. Henderson who used to help me with homework. I'm so sorry for the confusion, honey. I should have kept better track and let you know what I was doing. We chatted for a few more minutes about school and my classes, everything feeling normal again. When I hung up, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in 24 hours. But the days passed, and no receipts came. When I called to follow up, Mrs. Henderson said she was still looking for them. A few days later, she said her filing cabinet was more of a mess than she thought. Then it was that she'd accidentally thrown some papers away and was trying to get duplicates from the various companies. Each excuse sounded reasonable on its own, but together they started forming a pattern that made my stomach churn. Meanwhile, my bank account kept bleeding money. Smaller amounts now, $200 here, $150 there, but the withdrawals continued. When I mentioned this to Mrs. Henderson, she had explanations for those too. A plumbing emergency. Property tax installment. Utility deposits. Always something urgent, always something that couldn't wait for her to contact me first. By the end of October, my savings account had dropped to $312. I called my parents again, this time with a detailed list of every withdrawal and Mrs. Henderson's explanations. Surely now they'd see that something was wrong. Honey, Helen's been managing properties for decades, Mom said. I'm sure these are all legitimate expenses. You're lucky she's willing to handle all this for you instead of bothering you with every little thing while you're trying to focus on your studies. But Mom, she can't produce any receipts. And she never asked permission for any of these expenses. You gave her permission when you asked her to help manage your finances. Really, sweetheart, you sound paranoid. Helen has been nothing but generous to our family. The word paranoid hit like a slap. My own mother was gaslighting me, choosing to protect Mrs. Henderson's reputation over investigating my concerns. I was completely on my own. That night, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. If my own parents wouldn't help me, I'd have to help myself. I started documenting everything. Every phone call with Mrs. Henderson, every excuse, every promise of receipts that never materialized. I created a spreadsheet tracking all the withdrawals against her explanations, noting the dates and times of our conversations. The pattern was becoming undeniable, at least to me. But I needed more than just my word against hers. During Thanksgiving break, I drove straight to Mrs. Henderson's house instead of going home first. I needed to see those receipts she kept promising, needed to look her in the eye when she explained where nearly $15,000 of my money had gone. She greeted me with her usual warm hug, commenting on how thin I looked and insisting I needed a proper home-cooked meal. For a moment, sitting in her familiar kitchen with the smell of cinnamon candles and the sound of her chattering about neighborhood gossip, I almost convinced myself I was wrong about everything. Then I asked about the receipts. Oh honey, I'm still working on organizing all that paperwork. You know how it is. She waved her hand dismissively, not quite meeting my eyes. But don't worry about all those boring details. You should be focusing on your studies, not stressing about every little expense. Mrs. Henderson, it's not every little expense. It's my entire college fund. Her expression shifted, the mask slipping for just a moment. Your college fund? Sweetheart, you're being dramatic. It's just some maintenance costs and fees. Normal stuff that comes with property management. $15,000 worth of maintenance costs. The number hung in the air between us. I watched her face carefully, saw the micro-expressions she couldn't quite control. The brief flash of panic, quickly covered by indignation. I think you're confused about the amounts, dear. Maybe you should double-check your math. But I wasn't confused, and we both knew it. The conversation deteriorated quickly after that. Mrs. Henderson became increasingly agitated, accusing me of being ungrateful and disrespectful. She brought up everything she'd ever done for me, the graduation party, helping with my college applications, providing affordable housing, as if these kindnesses somehow justified the missing money. After everything I've done for you and your family, this is how you repay me. With suspicion and accusations. By the time I left, she'd made it clear that my housing arrangement was under review, and that she was deeply hurt by my lack of trust. The sweet family friend who'd been part of my life for a decade was gone, replaced by someone cold and manipulative who made me feel like I was crazy for asking about my own money. The worst part was going home afterward and watching my parents take her side yet again. Helen called us, Dad said before I'd even gotten my coat off. She's very upset about how you've been treating her. This needs to stop. She's stolen $15,000 from me. She has not stolen anything. Mom's voice was sharp, angrier than I'd heard her in years. She's been managing legitimate expenses, and you're acting like some kind of paranoid conspiracy theorist. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing. That's what my financial devastation was to them. An embarrassment. Standing in my childhood living room, looking at parents who refused to even consider that I might be telling the truth, I realized something that changed everything. They weren't going to help me. They were never going to help me. If I wanted my money back, if I wanted any justice at all, I was going to have to get it myself. And I was going to need proof they couldn't dismiss or ignore. I spent the rest of Thanksgiving break researching my options, hunched over my laptop in my childhood bedroom while my parents acted like I was being dramatic downstairs. The more I learned, the more hopeless everything seemed. Without Mrs. Henderson's cooperation, getting bank records that proved unauthorized access would require a formal police report. But the responding officer I spoke with over the phone made it clear that since I'd voluntarily given her my debit card and PIN, proving theft would be nearly impossible. You'd need evidence that she used the money for personal expenses rather than legitimate costs on your behalf, Officer Martinez explained. And even then, it's often treated as a civil matter rather than criminal. A civil matter. Which meant lawyers and court costs I couldn't afford, especially now that my college fund was gone. I tried calling Mrs. Henderson one more time before heading back to school, hoping she'd somehow had a change of heart and would work with me to sort everything out. I've been thinking about our conversation, I said carefully. Maybe we could go to the bank together and review everything. Just to make sure we're both understanding the situation correctly. Her laugh was sharp and bitter. Oh, I understand the situation perfectly, dear. You've decided I'm some kind of criminal based on your own financial irresponsibility. And frankly, I don't appreciate being treated like a suspect in my own home. I'm not trying to treat you like a suspect. I just need to understand where my money went. Your money. Her voice rose. Honey, that money went to expenses for your benefit. The apartment you've been living in doesn't maintain itself. Did you think electricity and water and repairs were free? But you never asked me about any of those expenses. And the amounts don't make sense for basic utilities. I didn't ask because you gave me permission to handle these things. That was the entire arrangement. She paused, and when she spoke again, her tone had shifted to something almost pitying. You know, I've been talking to your parents about your behavior lately. We're all concerned that the stress of college might be affecting your judgment. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? All these paranoid accusations, the obsession with money, the inability to trust people who care about you. These can be signs of serious mental health issues. Maybe you should consider talking to someone professional. She was trying to make me sound crazy. Worse, she was planting seeds of doubt with my parents, who already thought I was being dramatic. I'm not having mental health issues. I'm responding normally to having my money stolen. There you go again with that word. Stolen. She sighed heavily. I think it's best if we take a break from each other for a while. Clearly this living arrangement isn't working out, and I can't have this kind of negativity in my life. I'll need you to remove your belongings from the apartment by Christmas break. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, processing what had just happened. Not only had she essentially confirmed she wouldn't return my money, but she'd also officially evicted me and suggested to my parents that I was mentally unstable. When I went downstairs to tell my parents about the eviction, their reaction was everything I'd feared. Well, what did you expect? Mom said, not looking up from her magazine. You've been harassing the poor woman for months with these accusations. Of course she doesn't want you living there anymore. She stole my college fund. Enough. Dad's voice boomed through the living room. I don't want to hear another word about this ridiculous conspiracy theory. Helen Henderson is a good woman who tried to help you, and you've repaid her kindness by treating her like a criminal. I'm ashamed of how you've behaved. That night, lying in my childhood bed for what I knew would be one of the last times, I made a decision that scared me even as I committed to it. If no one would believe my words, I'd have to give them something they couldn't ignore. I was going to catch Mrs. Henderson in the act, whatever it took. I spent the first 2 weeks of December researching surveillance equipment online, using my meal plan money to slowly purchase what I needed. A tiny wireless camera, no bigger than a button. A motion-activated recording device. A small GPS tracker. Each purchase felt like a step deeper into something I never imagined I'd have to do. The plan was simple in theory, get evidence of Mrs. Henderson using my debit card. But executing it meant returning to her house during Christmas break, pretending everything was normal while secretly recording her. The thought made me sick, but what choice did I have? Everything went wrong before I even got started. 2 days before I was supposed to leave campus, Mrs. Henderson called. But she didn't call me, she called my parents, and they called me. Helen says you've been driving by her house at odd hours, Mom said without preamble. She's starting to feel unsafe. My stomach dropped. What? I haven't been anywhere near her house. I'm 3 hours away at school. She has a security camera, honey. She showed your father the footage yesterday. The world seemed to tilt sideways. That's impossible. I haven't left campus except to go to work. The timestamp clearly shows your car in her neighborhood at 2 a.m. last Tuesday, Dad's voice cut in. He was on speaker, and I could hear the disappointment dripping from every word. What exactly were you planning to do there in the middle of the night? My mind raced. Last Tuesday at 2 a.m., I'd been in my dorm room writing a paper that wasn't due until Friday. My roommate could vouch for me, she'd complained about my typing keeping her awake. But even as I tried to explain this, I realized how insane it sounded. Why would Mrs. Henderson lie about something so easily verified? Can I see this footage? I asked. We don't need to see anything else, Mom said firmly. What we need is for you to stop this obsessive behavior before it escalates further. Helen is considering getting a restraining order. A restraining order. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not only would that destroy any chance of getting evidence, but it would create a legal record that made me look like the unstable one. I need you to stay away from her completely, Dad continued. No driving by, no phone calls, no contact whatsoever. And you're not welcome in our house until you get professional help for this fixation you've developed. They were cutting me off. My parents were actually choosing Mrs. Henderson over their own daughter and cutting me off. Where am I supposed to go for Christmas break? My voice came out smaller than I intended. That's something you should have considered before you started stalking a family friend, Mom said coldly. Maybe you can stay with someone from school. The call ended with me sitting alone in my dorm room, officially homeless for the holidays and branded as some kind of stalker. But the more I thought about the supposed security footage, the more wrong it felt. I'd never given Mrs. Henderson my license plate number, but somehow she'd identified my car specifically. And the timing was too convenient, right when she'd want to discredit me before I could gather any evidence. That's when I realized what was happening. Mrs. Henderson wasn't just stealing my money, she was actively working to isolate me from anyone who might help. She turned my parents against me, evicted me from my housing, and now she was creating a narrative that painted me as dangerous and unstable. I pulled out my laptop and started typing an email to Officer Martinez. If I was going to be accused of stalking anyway, I might as well file that police report. But when I checked my bank account to document the latest withdrawals, I found something that made my blood run cold. My account was completely empty. Every last dollar, gone. And there was a new transaction I'd never seen before, an electronic transfer of my remaining balance to something called Henderson Property Management, Final Settlement. She'd taken everything. And somehow, she'd made it look like I'd authorized it. I stared at the Final Settlement transaction until my eyes burned. December 20th, 11:47 p.m., exactly when I'd been asleep in my dorm. The electronic authorization showed my student ID number as verification, information only someone with access to my personal files would have. My hands shook as I called the bank's emergency line. I need to report unauthorized transactions. Someone just emptied my entire account. The representative, different from the ones I'd spoken with before, pulled up my records. I see a final settlement payment to Henderson Property Management. This was processed as an automatic debit authorization you set up in August. I never set up any automatic authorization. According to our records, the authorization was established when your account management was transferred to Helen Henderson as your financial power of attorney. The words hit me like ice water. Financial power of attorney? I never signed anything like that. There was a pause, the sound of typing. The documentation shows it was filed with your initial deposit back in August, with your signature and notarization. Ma'am, if you're claiming this is fraudulent, you'll need to come in person with proper identification and file a formal dispute. I hung up and immediately called Mrs. Henderson, my heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. Oh, honey. Her voice was sickeningly sweet. I was just thinking about you. How are you handling everything? You forged power of attorney documents. The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds. When she spoke again, the sweetness was gone. That's a very serious accusation. I hope you have proof before you go around saying things like that. The bank has records of documents I never signed. The bank has records of documents your parents and I helped you set up when you left for college. You were so overwhelmed with everything, remember? Your mother even said how grateful she was that I was handling all the complicated financial arrangements for you. My mother. Of course she'd find a way to involve my parents in her story. I want copies of everything I supposedly signed. Oh, sweetie, I think you're having one of those episodes again. Maybe you should call that therapist your parents found for you. What therapist? The one for your paranoid delusions, dear. Your mother called me just this morning, so worried about your mental state. She said you'd been having memory problems, getting confused about conversations and events. It's such a shame when young people crack under pressure like this. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that for a split second I almost doubted myself. Almost. I want my money back. All of it. What money, honey? The funds that went to legitimate property management expenses? I have all the documentation right here. Repairs, utilities, administrative fees, it's all perfectly legal and accounted for. $15,000 in repairs. Well, there were some significant issues with the apartment that needed addressing. Foundation problems, electrical work, mold remediation. Very expensive, but necessary for safety reasons. I really should have charged more, considering the scope of the problems. She was rewriting history in real time, creating a narrative where my stolen college fund became legitimate repairs on an apartment I'd never even officially rented. I don't believe you. That's the paranoia talking, sweetheart. But believe me or not, everything was handled properly and legally. Your parents reviewed all the expenses and approved them. My parents approved $15,000 in repairs. They were very concerned about you living in an unsafe environment. Your father specifically said to spare no expense in making sure the apartment was habitable. Another lie, but one that would be impossible to disprove without recordings of conversations that never happened. I'm going to the police. Mrs. Henderson's laugh was light, almost musical. Oh honey, you already tried that, remember? Officer Martinez was very understanding about your condition. He's the one who suggested I document all our interactions, actually. For my own protection. The phone slipped in my sweaty palm. She'd been ahead of me every step of the way, building her defense while I'd been struggling just to understand what was happening. Don't call me anymore, she continued, her voice taking on that familiar edge. And don't come by my house. I have excellent security cameras now, and I won't hesitate to have you arrested if you show up here again. Your parents completely understand, they don't want you having another breakdown. The line went dead, leaving me alone with the devastating realization that Mrs. Henderson had orchestrated something far more sophisticated than simple theft. She'd systematically destroyed my credibility, isolated me from my support system, and created a paper trail that made her look like the victim. But she'd made one mistake. She'd gotten overconfident. I sat in my empty dorm room staring at my laptop screen, my bank account balance mocking me with its perfect zero. Christmas break started tomorrow, and I had nowhere to go and no money to get there even if I did. But Mrs. Henderson's overconfidence had revealed something crucial. She'd mentioned Officer Martinez by name, claimed he'd suggested she document our interactions. The problem was, I'd never actually filed that police report. I'd only called the general line and spoken to him once, briefly, about hypothetical scenarios. So how did she know his name? My fingers flew across the keyboard as I searched the county police database for Martinez. There he was, Officer Roberto Martinez, 15 years on the force, currently assigned to Financial Crimes Division. But more importantly, his photo showed a man I'd never seen before in my life. Mrs. Henderson had slipped up. She'd name-dropped a specific officer to intimidate me, not realizing I'd never actually met him. Which meant she either knew him personally, or she'd dealt with financial crime investigations before. I dug deeper, searching public records and court documents. It took 3 hours of cross-referencing, but finally I found it, a civil case from 2 years ago. Henderson versus Morley Property Trust. The details were sealed, but the case summary mentioned disputed financial management and settlement reached. She'd done this before. My heart raced as I searched for more. Sandra Morley, elderly widow, property dispute with Helen Henderson. I found an obituary. Mrs. Morley had died 8 months after the case was settled, leaving no family to pursue further legal action. I was shaking as I picked up my phone. This time, I wasn't calling to ask questions. This time, I was filing an actual police report. Officer Martinez. This is about Helen Henderson and financial fraud. I think she's done this before. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Martinez in a police station, my laptop open between us showing bank records, transaction histories, and the civil case documents I'd found. She knew your name, I explained. She said you told her to document our interactions, but we've never met before today. She's building credibility by name-dropping you, probably hoping I'd never actually follow through with a report. Martinez leaned back in his chair, studying the timeline I'd created. The Morley case. I remember that one. We suspected elder fraud, but couldn't prove criminal intent. The old lady's family was convinced Henderson had manipulated her, but she died before we could build a solid case. So she has a pattern. Potentially. But your case is complicated by the fact that you voluntarily gave her access to your accounts. Even if she forged the power of attorney documents, proving criminal intent versus civil dispute is challenging. My heart sank. So there's nothing you can do. I didn't say that. Martinez pulled out a notepad. You mentioned she claimed to have security footage of you stalking her house. But you say you were never there. I hadn't left campus in weeks. My roommate can verify that, my work schedule, my class attendance records. Good. Because if she's fabricating evidence to support a harassment claim, that's a crime in itself. Filing false police reports, evidence tampering, those charges would be much easier to prove than the financial fraud. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. There's something else, Martinez continued. The power of attorney documents she filed with your bank, those require notarization. If they're forged, the notary public database will have records we can verify. Every notarization is logged with date, time, and the notary's license number. He made a note in his file. I'm going to need you to stay available over break. Don't go home, don't contact Henderson directly. Let us handle this from here. As I walked out of the police station, I realized Mrs. Henderson's biggest mistake wasn't just getting overconfident. It was underestimating how desperate she'd made me. The next morning, Martinez called with news that made my stomach drop. We ran the notary verification on those power of attorney documents, he said without preamble. They check out. Real notary, real signatures, filed properly with the bank in August. I sank into my desk chair, the small spark of hope I'd been nursing suddenly extinguished. But I never signed anything. The notary remembers the appointment. Says you came in with Henderson and your mother, seemed nervous but coherent. She has detailed notes because Henderson specifically asked her to document your mental state for the records. My mother. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. My mom was there. According to the notary's log, yes. Your mother vouched for your identity and mental capacity to sign legal documents. The notary said it seemed like a caring family friend helping with college financial planning. I closed my eyes, trying to remember August. Moving preparations, shopping for dorm supplies, the chaos of getting ready to leave home. Had my mother really taken me somewhere to sign documents I didn't understand? Or had they forged everything so carefully that even the notary believed the lie? There's more, Martinez continued. Henderson filed a formal complaint this morning. Says you called her 23 times yesterday, made threats, and she's requesting a restraining order. She provided call logs from her phone company. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. I called her once, for maybe 5 minutes. Her records show multiple calls throughout the day, some lasting over an hour. Several voicemails with what she describes as increasingly unhinged threats. She's turning them over to us this afternoon. The room started spinning. Officer Martinez, I swear to you, I made one phone call. Check my phone records. I plan to. But if her evidence is fabricated, it's very sophisticated. Phone company logs are hard to fake. After he hung up, I sat staring at my phone in horror. Somehow, Henderson had created evidence of harassment that never happened. Just like the security footage of my car that I knew was impossible. I was still trying to process this when my roommate burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement. Oh my God, you're famous. Chloe thrust her laptop at me. Look. The screen showed a Facebook post in our town's community group. Mrs. Henderson's profile picture smiled warmly next to a long, heartfelt message. Asterisk, my heart is breaking tonight. I've been trying to help a troubled young woman transition to college life, managing some financial responsibilities for her family. But her mental health struggles have escalated beyond what I can handle. She's been stalking me, making threatening phone calls, and accusing me of stealing money that went to legitimate expenses her own parents approved. I'm sharing this not to shame anyone, but because I'm genuinely worried about her well-being. If you see her in the neighborhood, please encourage her to seek professional help rather than engaging with these paranoid delusions. Her parents and I just want her to get better. Broken heart, asterisk. The post had 47 likes and dozens of comments. People I'd known my whole life were calling me troubled and dangerous. Mrs. Patterson from down the street wrote, Helen is such a saint for trying to help despite everything. My old high school teacher commented, so sad when promising young people struggle like this. Helen, you're an angel for not pressing charges. This is insane, I whispered, scrolling through comment after comment that painted Mrs. Henderson as a victim and me as an unstable stalker. Chloe sat beside me, her excitement fading as she realized something was seriously wrong. Wait, this is about you. But you've been here all week. You haven't gone anywhere. She's lying about all of it. But somehow she's made it look real. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, saw the Facebook post. So sorry you're going through this. Maybe it's time to accept help and stop fighting everyone who cares about you. A concerned friend, Then another, get help before you hurt someone. And another, your parents must be so ashamed. Mrs. Henderson had weaponized social media against me, turning my entire hometown into witnesses for her victimhood. Even if I eventually proved the financial fraud, who would believe me now? I'd forever be the crazy girl who stalked and threatened a sweet family friend. My phone rang. Dad's number. Pack your things, he said the moment I answered. We've made arrangements for you to get help. What kind of arrangements? Inpatient treatment. There's a facility that specializes in paranoid disorders and financial obsessions. Your insurance will cover most of it. The words hit like ice water. They were trying to have me committed. Dad, please listen to me. She's manipulating all of you. Enough. Dr. Williams reviewed Helen's documentation of your behavior. The threats, the stalking, the elaborate conspiracy theories. You're sick, honey, and we're not enabling this anymore. What threats? I never threatened anyone. Helen has hours of recorded voicemails. We've heard them ourselves. Hours of voicemails. In my voice. Saying things I'd never said. Mrs. Henderson hadn't just stolen my money. She'd stolen my entire reality. The psychiatric facility looked exactly like every nightmare I'd ever had about losing control of my life. Beige walls, locked doors, and staff members who spoke in a carefully neutral tones reserved for people they considered unstable. Your parents are very concerned about you, Dr. Williams said during my intake interview. She was a thin woman with kind eyes that somehow made everything worse. They've provided extensive documentation of your recent behavioral changes. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, my hands clenched in my lap, trying to stay calm. Getting angry or defensive would only confirm everything they already believed about me. Can I see this documentation? Dr. Williams opened a thick folder. Phone records showing obsessive calling patterns. Social media posts from community members expressing concern. Audio recordings of threatening voicemails. And testimony from Mrs. Henderson, who despite everything, is still advocating for treatment rather than criminal charges. She turned her computer screen toward me. Mrs. Henderson's voice filled the small room, but the words coming out made my skin crawl. You think you can steal from me and get away with it? I know where you live, Helen. I know your routines. Maybe it's time someone taught you what it feels like to lose everything. The voice was mine. Unmistakably mine. But I had never, ever said those words. That's not me, I whispered. Dr. Williams paused the recording. The voice analysis confirms it's your vocal patterns. There are 6 more recordings, each escalating in severity. My hands started shaking. Someone faked those. There's technology now that can replicate voices. That's certainly possible, Dr. Williams said gently. But combined with the other evidence, the stalking, the financial delusions, the family's testimony, it paints a concerning picture. What did my parents tell you? She consulted her notes. They're deeply worried about your mental state since starting college. Your mother mentioned you've always been prone to anxiety, but this obsession with Mrs. Henderson has consumed your life. You've accused a family friend of stealing money that was clearly spent on legitimate expenses. Did they show you bank records? Receipts for these expenses? They provided Mrs. Henderson's detailed accounting. Property repairs, utilities, administrative fees for managing your finances while you're at school. Everything appears properly documented. I felt like I was drowning. Can I make a phone call? To the police officer investigating my case. Dr. Williams looked surprised. You filed a police report? Yes. Officer Martinez in the Financial Crimes Division. He was looking into inconsistencies in Mrs. Henderson's story. She made a note. I'll reach out to Officer Martinez. If there's an active investigation, we need to coordinate your treatment accordingly. For the first time in days, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. Martinez had seemed to believe me, or at least take my concerns seriously. Maybe he'd found something that would cut through all the manufactured evidence. That hope died 2 hours later when Dr. Williams returned. I spoke with Officer Martinez, she said, settling into her chair. There's no active investigation. In fact, he recommended I contact you immediately if you try to involve law enforcement again. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? According to Officer Martinez, you never actually filed a formal report. You called asking hypothetical questions about financial fraud, then hung up when he explained the legal requirements for proving theft. He was concerned about your agitated state during that conversation. But I met with him yesterday. I showed him bank records, court documents about Mrs. Henderson's previous case. There was no meeting, Dr. Williams said softly. Officer Martinez confirmed he's never met you in person. He's also concerned that you somehow obtained his personal information to create this elaborate fantasy about police involvement. The room started spinning. Either I was completely losing my mind, or Mrs. Henderson had somehow gotten to Officer Martinez too. Can I call him myself? Right now? Dr. Williams hesitated. I suppose that would be appropriate, under supervision. She dialed the number and put the call on speaker. Martinez here. Officer Martinez, this is the girl who came to see you yesterday about Helen Henderson. There was a long pause. Miss, I think you're confused. We've never met. You called once asking about hypothetical fraud scenarios, but that's our only contact. Are you the young woman Dr. Williams mentioned? Because if you're having false memories about police meetings, that's something you should discuss with your treatment team. My world collapsed completely. Either I was genuinely losing my grip on reality, or Mrs. Henderson had orchestrated something so sophisticated that even the police were part of it. Staring at Dr. Williams across her sterile desk, I made a decision that terrified me. If everyone thought I was delusional, I'd use that to my advantage. You're right, I said quietly, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. I think I've been confused about a lot of things. The stress of college, being away from home, maybe I did imagine some of those conversations. Dr. Williams leaned forward, her expression softening. It takes courage to acknowledge when our perceptions might be distorted. That's the first step toward healing. I nodded, playing the part of the broken girl finally accepting help. I just want to understand what's real and what isn't. Could I see all the evidence again? The recordings, the bank statements. Maybe if I go through everything calmly, I can start to see where my thinking went wrong. That's exactly the kind of constructive approach we like to see, she said, pulling out the thick folder. Let's review everything together. For the next hour, I listened to voice recordings that sounded exactly like me making threats I'd never made. I studied bank statements showing a power of attorney I didn't remember signing. I read detailed repair invoices for work allegedly done on an apartment I'd barely lived in. But this time, instead of protesting, I took notes. Real notes. The first recording was allegedly made on October 15th at 3:47 p.m. But I remembered that day perfectly. I'd been in Professor Chen's advanced statistics class, a mandatory attendance seminar with 40 witnesses. The second recording was from October 22nd at 11:23 p.m., when I'd been working my shift at the campus library, signed in and monitored by security cameras. Each piece of evidence had a timestamp, and I was building a timeline of alibis. This is really helpful, I told Dr. Williams, forcing gratitude into my voice. I can see how my memory has been playing tricks on me. But I'm wondering, for my own peace of mind, could I get copies of everything? Sometimes writing things down helps me process better. She hesitated. That's not typically something we provide to patients. Please. I think seeing it in black and white might help me accept reality. And maybe I could write a letter to Mrs. Henderson, apologizing for everything I put her through. The mention of an apology seemed to decide her. I think that would be very therapeutic. I'll have copies made. That night, alone in my locked room, I spread the documents across my narrow bed like pieces of a puzzle. Every fabricated piece of evidence told a story, not the story Mrs. Henderson wanted everyone to believe, but the story of how she constructed this elaborate frame-up. The voice recordings were too perfect. In each one, I used phrases and speech patterns that sounded like me, but I'd never once used Mrs. Henderson's full name the way the voice in the recordings did. I'd always called her Mrs. H or just Helen when talking to my parents. But the recordings consistently used Mrs. Henderson in a formal way that felt unnatural. The bank statements showed the power of attorney was notarized on August 15th at 2:30 p.m. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to August 15th in my photos. There I was at 2:30 p.m., at my going-away party, surrounded by a dozen friends with timestamps on every selfie. But the most damning evidence was in the repair invoices Mrs. Henderson had submitted. Every single contractor listed had addresses that led back to P.O. boxes registered within the last 6 months. The business licenses were all recently filed. She hadn't just stolen my money, she created fake companies to justify the theft. I was documenting everything when my roommate's face appeared in a video call on my phone. "Oh my God, where are you?" Chloe whispered. "Your parents came by asking if I'd seen signs of your mental breakdown. They wanted to search your stuff for evidence of paranoid behavior." My heart pounded. "What did you tell them?" "That you've been the most stable person I know. But they seemed convinced you've been hiding some kind of psychological crisis." She paused. "There's something else. That Mrs. Henderson woman. She's been posting updates about you on Facebook. Really detailed stuff about your treatment progress and how grateful she is that you're getting help. She's posting about my medical treatment. Yeah, and people are eating it up. She's got like 200 comments from people praising her for being so forgiving and supportive." Chloe's voice dropped. "But here's the weird thing, she's sharing details about your therapy that she shouldn't know. Like, specific things about your daily routine here." My blood ran cold. "What kind of details?" "She mentioned you having art therapy on Tuesdays and group sessions on Thursday mornings. She even knew about your roommate Sarah having nightmares. But my roommate here wasn't named Sarah, it was Jennifer. And I'd never had art therapy. Mrs. Henderson was making up details about my treatment, but getting basic facts wrong. Which meant she didn't have a legitimate source inside the facility. Chloe, I need you to do something for me. Can you screenshot all of her posts with timestamps? And can you check something else, look up those contractors I'm going to text you. See if their business addresses actually exist. Are you sure you should be investigating this stuff while you're in treatment?" "I'm not having a breakdown," I said firmly. "I'm being framed. And I think I can prove it." After we hung up, I stared at the evidence spread across my bed. Mrs. Henderson had made mistakes, small ones, but enough to unravel her story if I could find the right thread to pull. The question was whether I could prove it before she convinced everyone I was too mentally unstable to be believed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, *, hope you're enjoying your stay. Some people just can't handle the real world. A concerned friend, *. Mrs. Henderson was monitoring me somehow, taunting me even here. But she just made another mistake. The text had come from a number I could trace. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Dr. Williams escorted my parents into the common room, their faces wearing matching expressions of pity and disappointment that made my stomach churn. "Honey, you look better," Mom said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Are you starting to see things more clearly?" I forced a smile, remembering my strategy of appearing cooperative. "I think so. Dr. Williams has been helping me understand how stress can distort perception." Dad nodded approvingly. "Helen wanted to come visit, but we thought it might be too overwhelming for you right now. She's been asking about you constantly," Mom added. "Posted the sweetest message yesterday about how she's praying for your recovery." My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice level. "That's very kind of her. She even offered to cover some of your treatment costs," Dad continued. Said she feels partially responsible for not recognizing the signs of your breakdown sooner. The manipulation was breathtaking. Mrs. Henderson was positioning herself as so generous and forgiving that questioning her would seem not just ungrateful, but genuinely insane. There's something we need to discuss, Dr. Williams interjected. About your college enrollment. Given the extent of your episode, we're recommending you take a medical leave of absence for the spring semester. My heart stopped. What? You need time to focus on recovery, Mom said gently. Your professors have been notified, and your academic advisor thinks it's the responsible choice. But I'm not behind in any classes. My grades are fine. I can manage both. Sweetheart, you're in a psychiatric facility, Dad said. Your college fund is gone because you became obsessed with conspiracy theories instead of managing your finances responsibly. You clearly can't handle the pressure of academic life right now. I stared at him, realizing the full scope of what was happening. They weren't just discrediting my claims about the theft, they were systematically dismantling my entire future. No college meant no degree, no career prospects, no independence. I'd be completely dependent on family who already believed I was mentally unstable. I'd like to contest the medical leave, I said carefully. Dr. Williams exchanged glances with my parents. That's not typically advisable during active treatment. But I have that right, don't I? To have my academic standing reviewed by the college's medical board. Another pause. Technically, yes. But it would require documentation of your current mental state, testimony from treating physicians. And testimony from people who know me well, I added. Like professors, classmates, employers who can speak to my actual behavior. My parents looked uncomfortable. They'd been operating under the assumption that I'd passively accept whatever decisions they made for me. I think that's premature, Mom said quickly. You should focus on getting better first. I am getting better. And part of recovery is advocating for myself, right, Dr. Williams? She nodded slowly, clearly torn between supporting patient autonomy and what my parents wanted to hear. That afternoon, after my parents left, I made a discovery that changed everything. The facility had a computer lab for patients, with monitored internet access for therapeutic research. I'd been given 30 minutes to research healthy coping mechanisms. Instead, I traced the phone number that had texted me. The number belonged to a prepaid phone purchased 3 days ago at a convenience store in my hometown. But more importantly, the store had security cameras, and I could request footage through a formal police inquiry. I pulled up the police department's online report system and filed a formal complaint about harassment via anonymous text messages, providing the number and requesting investigation of the phone's purchase. If Mrs. Henderson had bought that phone herself, or used someone else to buy it, there would be video evidence. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had a concrete lead that didn't depend on anyone believing my word against hers. But as I logged off the computer, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My activity was being monitored, and there was another user currently logged into my session from a remote location. Someone was watching everything I did, in real time. And given the timing of that text message, I was pretty sure I knew who. The realization that someone was monitoring my computer activity hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the screen, my cursor frozen over the logout button, afraid that any movement would confirm what I discovered. Mrs. Henderson wasn't just framing me, she had access to everything I was doing, even here in what was supposed to be a secure medical facility. I forced myself to browse a few articles about stress management and breathing exercises before casually logging out, my mind racing. How was she accessing the facility's network? Did she know someone who worked here, or was this something more sophisticated? That evening during group therapy, I studied every staff member's face, looking for signs of complicity. Dr. Williams seemed genuinely concerned about my welfare, but there was something in her assistant's expression when she looked at me, a flicker of recognition that felt wrong. After group ended, I lingered behind, pretending to organize my notebook while the assistant, Margaret, cleaned up. Excuse me, I said casually, I think I know you from somewhere. Did you grow up in Millbrook? Margaret froze for just a second too long. No, I'm from out of state. You must be thinking of someone else. But I'd seen that reaction before, the same micro-expression Mrs. Henderson had shown when I'd first asked about the missing money. The brief flash of panic, quickly covered. Of course, my mistake. It's just that you look so much like someone from my neighborhood. People say I have one of those familiar faces, Margaret said, but she was avoiding eye contact now, focusing intently on wiping down already clean tables. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, pieces clicking into place. If Mrs. Henderson had someone inside the facility feeding her information, it would explain how she knew details about my daily routine to post on Facebook. It would also explain how she'd known about my computer activity. But more importantly, it meant I couldn't trust any communication that went through official channels here. The next morning brought devastating news. Dr. Williams called me into her office with an expression I'd learned to dread. I received some concerning information overnight, she said, opening a new folder. Apparently you've been filing false police reports from our computer lab. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? The complaint you submitted about harassment, the police department contacted us directly. They said you've been making repeated false reports about Mrs. Henderson for months, and they're considering charges for misuse of emergency services. The room spun around me. But I only filed one report, and it was about the text message. According to their records, you filed 7 different complaints over the past 3 months. All dismissed as unfounded. She turned her computer screen toward me. They've flagged your name in their system as a potential chronic false reporter. I stared at the screen showing police reports I'd never filed, complaints about incidents that never happened, all bearing my name and personal information. Mrs. Henderson hadn't just been building a case against me, she'd been poisoning every possible avenue of help. I never filed those reports. Someone's using my identity. That's exactly what someone experiencing paranoid delusions would believe, Dr. Williams said gently. The inability to accept responsibility for your own actions is part of the condition. My hands started shaking. Every move I made, Mrs. Henderson was 3 steps ahead. Every attempt to clear my name only made me look more unstable. Dr. Williams, please. Can we call Officer Martinez together? Right now, with you listening? She hesitated. I suppose that wouldn't hurt. But when she dialed, the number was disconnected. The Martinez I thought I'd spoken with, if I'd ever actually spoken with him at all, had vanished completely. I was trapped in a nightmare where reality itself was being rewritten around me, and the only person who could prove my innocence was the same person systematically destroying my life. That afternoon, I had what felt like my first stroke of luck in months. During my supervised phone time, I called Chloe using the facility's landline instead of my monitored cell phone. "Thank God you called," she whispered. "I've been trying to reach you for days. I found something huge." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" "Those contractor addresses you asked me to check. They're all fake." But I did more digging. I found the real companies Mrs. Henderson copied the names from. Get this, they're all located in different states, and when I called them, none of them have ever heard of Helen Henderson or done any work in our area. I gripped the phone tighter. So the invoices are completely fabricated? It gets better. I also looked up that notary who supposedly witnessed your power of attorney signing. She exists, but she moved to Arizona 6 months ago. I called her directly. She has no record of notarizing anything for you or your family. My heart hammered against my ribs. Finally, concrete proof that couldn't be dismissed as my imagination. "Chloe, you're amazing. Can you?" The line went dead. I stared at the phone in confusion, then noticed Margaret standing in the doorway, her hand near the phone system's control panel. "Sorry, honey," she said with fake sympathy. "Your phone time is up. Dr. Williams needs to see you." But I'd been on the phone for less than 10 minutes of my allotted 30. Margaret had deliberately cut off my call the moment Chloe started providing evidence. In Dr. Williams' office, I found my parents waiting again, their faces grim. "We need to discuss your future living arrangements," Mom said without preamble. "After you're discharged, you obviously can't go back to college. Your mother and I have been talking with Helen," Dad added. "She's graciously agreed to let you stay in her apartment temporarily, while you transition back to normal life." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "You want me to live with Mrs. Henderson?" "She's the only one offering practical solutions," Mom said. "She understands your condition, she's willing to help manage your finances so this doesn't happen again, and she can keep an eye on your mental health." Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. Having a stable support system is crucial for preventing relapse. The trap was closing completely. They wanted to put me directly under Mrs. Henderson's control, where she could monitor my every move and continue building evidence of my supposed instability. "What if I don't want that arrangement?" I asked carefully. My parents exchanged glances. "Then you'll need to find somewhere else to live," Dad said. "Because you're not coming home. Not until you accept responsibility for your actions and stop these paranoid accusations." "Helen is being incredibly generous," Mom added. "After everything you put her through, she's still willing to help. The least you can do is show some gratitude." I nodded slowly, pretending to consider their words while my mind raced. They were giving me an ultimatum: submit to Mrs. Henderson's complete control, or be completely cut off from family support. "I appreciate her offer," I said finally. "But I'd like some time to think about it." "There's nothing to think about," Dad said firmly. "You're in no position to be making demands." That evening, lying in my narrow bed, I realized Mrs. Henderson's plan was near completion. She'd stolen my money, destroyed my credibility, isolated me from my family, gotten me committed to a psychiatric facility, and now she was positioning herself as my savior and caretaker. But she'd made one crucial error: she'd gotten so confident that she placed someone inside the facility to monitor me directly. And tomorrow, I was going to prove it. I spent the night planning every detail. Mrs. Henderson thought she had me completely trapped, but she underestimated one crucial thing: I'd learned to think like her. The next morning during breakfast, I loudly announced to several patients that I'd decided to accept Mrs. Henderson's generous offer to let me live with her after discharge. "She's been like a mother to me," I said, making sure Margaret could hear every word. "I'm so grateful she's willing to help despite everything I put her through." Margaret's reaction was immediate: a subtle smile, a quick glance at her phone. She was reporting back. During computer lab time, I made a show of researching how to apologize for false accusations and rebuilding trust after paranoid episodes. But what I was really doing was using the facility's printer to make copies of Chloe's research about the fake contractors and the Arizona notary. Then I made my move. "Margaret," I said quietly as she supervised my session, "I need to tell you something important. About Mrs. Henderson." She looked up sharply. "What about her?" "I know you two are working together." The blood drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The computer monitoring, the cut phone calls, reporting my activities to her." I kept my voice calm, matter of fact. "I'm not angry about it. Actually, I'm grateful." Margaret stared at me, clearly off balance. "You helped me realize how sick I really was," I continued. "All those paranoid thoughts about Mrs. Henderson stealing from me, you helped me see how irrational they were. I want to thank her personally for caring enough to make sure I got proper treatment." What? Could you tell her I'd like to call her? To apologize properly before I'm discharged?" Margaret's confusion was obvious. She'd expected anger or accusations, not gratitude. "I suppose. I mean, if Dr. Williams approves." "Actually," I said, pulling out my hidden copies of Chloe's research, "could you give her these? I found some information she might want to see. About those contractors who worked on the apartment." Margaret took the papers automatically, scanning them. I watched her face change as she realized what she was looking at: evidence that the contractors were fake, that the notary had moved to Arizona, that the entire financial justification for the theft was fabricated. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "My roommate from college has been helping me fact-check my memories. Trying to separate reality from delusion, you know." I smiled innocently. "Some of these contractor addresses don't seem to exist. Mrs. Henderson probably got scammed by fake companies. She should know so she can report them to the police." Margaret's hands were shaking now. She was trapped. If she refused to pass along the information, it would confirm she was working with Mrs. Henderson. If she did pass it along, she'd be delivering evidence of fraud directly to the person who'd committed it. "I should probably discuss this with Dr. Williams first," she stammered. "Of course. I'm sure she'll want to help Mrs. Henderson deal with these dishonest contractors too. 20 minutes later, I watched through the common room window as Margaret made a frantic phone call outside, pacing back and forth with clear agitation. By evening, everything unraveled. Dr. Williams called me into her office where Officer Martinez, the real Officer Martinez, was waiting with a warrant. Margaret Stevens has confessed to monitoring your activities for Helen Henderson, he said. In exchange for $500 a month, she was providing detailed reports about your daily routine, your phone calls, and your computer usage. My legs nearly gave out with relief. So you believe me? The evidence your friend compiled was compelling enough to get a warrant for Henderson's financial records. We found the fake contractor invoices, forged notary documents, and evidence of voice cloning software on her computer. Martinez looked grim. She'd been planning this for months, possibly targeting you since before you left for college. But why me? You were young, trusting, and your parents gave her unprecedented access to your finances. She'd done something similar to elderly Mrs. Morley, found vulnerable targets with money and social isolation. Dr. Williams looked stricken. I owe you an enormous apology. The manufactured evidence was so comprehensive that we never questioned. She's very good at what she does, Martinez interrupted. But she got greedy and careless. The voice recordings had digital fingerprints from the cloning software. The fake police reports were traced to computers in her home. And Margaret's testimony about the monitoring scheme proved premeditation. 2 weeks later, I stood in a courtroom watching Mrs. Henderson, no longer the warm family friend, but a cold stranger in handcuffs, sentenced to 8 years for fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse charges related to Mrs. Morley's case. My parents sat behind me, their faces showing shame and horror at how completely they'd been manipulated. The money was gone. Mrs. Henderson had spent most of it on gambling debts and luxury purchases. But the State Victim Compensation Fund would cover part of my college costs, and my parents had already started making arrangements to help fund the rest. I'm so sorry, Mom whispered as we left the courthouse. We should have listened to you. I squeezed her hand. She fooled everyone. That was her talent. As we walked into the sunlight, I realized something important. I'd survived someone trying to steal not just my money, but my entire reality. And in fighting back, I discovered a strength I never knew I had. Mrs. Henderson had taught me a valuable lesson, though not the one she'd intended. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones you need to watch most carefully. But more importantly, sometimes you have to trust yourself even when everyone else thinks you're wrong.